Welcome back, my darlings, to Your Hero's Quest, Episode 3. Today we're talking about slaying inner dragons and getting rid of shoulds in life. Obviously, we all have inner battles that we're constantly faced with, shadows and self-doubts and limiting beliefs and all of that. And the collective dragon can be considered the ego. So how does that get in the way of your quest? Let's delve in. We're going to visit a few different myths and also a Chinese parable to help us get some more insight on this and valuable wisdom from them. And also, when you're on the quest, you can feel like you're totally on the wrong path, in the wrong place. You should have taken path number 3 in the woods, but you went with number 1 and now you're doubting yourself. I just want to assure you that you really can never take the wrong path because you'll always get led back to the destiny. And it just might be a detour that you were honestly meant to take because you needed to meet someone on that detour, have an experience on that detour that led you to a nugget of wisdom or some new insight that will aid you on the main path of your life. So if you haven't found your quest yet, like we talked about in the last episode, don't worry, because obviously you can listen to that one to help you find it. But I don't know if I said this, it's never too late, you're not too old, and you are exactly where you're meant to be. So I'm going to read the parable of the Chinese farmer because I just find it so insightful in surrendering to the flow of life and not trying to control things and not giving things such a attachment, having such an attachment to outcomes and judgment on how things are unfolding. Because our ego wants so badly to control and to keep us safe and to know why and what's happening. But the divine says, the soul says, flow with what comes up in life. Trust that whatever is happening is right and surrender to it all. So this parable, and this is, forgive me, I have to read this off my computer. This is Alan Watts's retelling. So, once upon a time, there was a Chinese farmer whose horse ran away. That evening, all of his neighbors came around to commiserate. They said, "We are so sorry to hear your horse has run away. This is most unfortunate." The farmer said, "Maybe." The next day, the horse came back, bringing 7 wild horses with it. And in the evening, everybody came back and said, "Oh, isn't that lucky? What a great turn of events. You now have 8 horses." The farmer again said, "Maybe." The following day, his son tried to break one of the horses, and while riding it, he was thrown and broke his leg. The neighbors then said, "Oh dear, that's too bad." And the farmer responded, "Maybe." The next day, the conscription officers came around to conscript people into the army, and they rejected his son because he had a broken leg. Again, all the neighbors came around and said, "Isn't that great?" And again, he said, "Maybe." The whole process of nature is an integrated process of immense complexity, and it's really impossible to tell whether anything that happens is good or bad, because you never know what will be the consequence of the misfortune, or you never know what will be the consequences of good fortune. And this is where it's beautiful to be able to let go of attachments and judgments on situations, because obviously the village people immediately formed these judgments about what was happening, but the farmer was the detached observer. He was surrendered. He just was surrendered to what was happening. And of course, in life, we always have challenges and we have blessings, and they're all intertwined and they're up and they're down, and it's all of that. So where can we learn to become the detached observer? Because when you get deeply attached to an outcome of something and then it doesn't go that way, it causes a lot of chaos within us. When you can just see what is happening and say, well, let's see where this goes. That is where you can find peace and tranquility. And obviously we can have attachment to a goal. That's a healthy attachment, I think. But it's in the detachment of how you're going to get there and how things are going to unfold to facilitate that goal happening. It's surrendering to the divine taking over how that goal will manifest rather than the ego needing to know every step of the way and control every little thing. And it's also a deep acceptance of life, accepting what comes your way, accepting what comes on your path. And if you sort of mythologize your own life, and look at it as a myth, because when you look at these myths, the characters had to go through certain things to get where they were going, to get to the final showdown and the ultimate boon. You can see that in your own life as well. You have to go through certain things to gain the wisdom to be where you are today. So if you can just say, okay, I know this is happening because it's meant to, and I don't know, is it good or bad? Maybe, but I'll find out, and it's what you make of it. And this doesn't mean you have no control over your life, because you are the creator of your reality. But it means that you get to control your reaction to the things that come into your life, and you get to decide how you're going to feel about them, right? So that is where the power lies on the path. I personally think the mind is the greatest of our tools. It is incredible. The mind is absolutely incredible. I don't agree at all with certain spiritual teachers that may say like the ego is horrible or our mind is like the bane of our existence. I personally don't think that. However, if we become devoted to our mind and let the mind completely run the show, that is where we fall into problems. And as I mentioned, perhaps you feel like you have gone in the wrong path, but really you have not. And they say you can only connect the dots of your life backwards, right? Because when we're in certain situations, you're like, oh my gosh, like why is this happening to me? Or when is this going to end, right? But there's always, whether it's a lesson or a blessing, something is always gained from every situation that we're in. And I always find this again in myths and tales of connecting the dots backwards. And also kind of how things are destined from the start for all of these characters. They're destined to fulfill this certain quest. They have no idea of that, but it was always their destiny, and they're simply going on that journey towards it. I always think of Lord of the Rings for this one because so many fated things happen, but I think of Bilbo in The Hobbit. He gets separated from Gandalf and the dwarves in the heart of one of the mountains where there are a bunch of goblins after them. And while you can look at this, him being separated from them is like, oh no, this is like the worst thing that could ever happen, right? He's now alone in the dark in this mountain. He ends up stumbling upon the One Ring. He literally is feeling the ground of the path, and his hand encloses on the ring because Gollum had dropped it. And obviously Bilbo was meant to find the ring. And as he's in this place, he says, go back, he thought, no good at all. Go sideways, impossible. Go forward, only thing to do, on we go. And he gets up with his little sword and continues down into the depth of the mountain. Now, of course, him finding this ring has immense implications. In fact, it's almost hard to wrap your mind around the backward connecting dots of this story, because obviously then Frodo gets the ring, and then Frodo destroys the ring, and the ring was forged millennia ago and all of this, and then it had fallen into Gollum's hand somehow, and ages pass until Bilbo stumbles upon it in the dark. So this is literally your life as well. And you can look back on your life and say, oh, wow, if that thing hadn't happened, I would never have gotten this and then that. And wow, now here I am at this place in my life because of all those things, even if at the time I perceived it to be a certain way. So good or bad? Maybe. Our mind has the power for great good and deeds and creating so many amazing things, but it also has the power to remove us from the power of nature. And this is seen in the tale of Siegfried and the dragon. There is a great dragon named Fafnir, and he's hoarding, of course, a vast treasure of gold and also a ring of power, the ring of power. And this is a Norse legend. And Siegfried slays the dragon and then drinks his blood. And he is granted the ability to talk to birds and thus an innate and deep understanding of nature. So this legend signifies the slaying really of the ego, of that mind self, of the material, and recommuning with the soul, the true self, the true knowledge. And as Joseph Campbell points out in a more modern myth of Star Wars, Darth Vader has surrendered to the mind. He becomes like a machine, and he gives up the nature for the state, for society, for the system. However, he also is redeemed by blood because Luke is his son, and he simply cannot kill Luke when it comes down to it. And he goes back to the nature of the true self, which really is love, right? Another story that talks of the slaying of the ego for the divine is Percival and the Grail. So Percival is the original Grail hero of the Grail quest, and he is raised in poverty in the woods with his mother. And when he's like a teenager, he sees some great knights riding through the woods, and their armor is gleaming, and he vows to join them on this quest. So he becomes a Knight of the Round Table, and he goes on all sorts of quests, and he encounters a man who is fishing, and he's actually the wounded Fisher King. Percival's looking for lodgings, and the king says, oh, well, there's a castle down the way a little bit. And it turns out this is the Grail Castle. This is the castle. And he enters the castle, and the Grail is brought out by these maidens, and they have this glorious feast. And it was prophesied that a fool, Percival, would enter the castle and ask this question: whom does the Grail serve? Because only then can this wounded Fisher King be healed. But Percival's ego sort of takes over. His mother told him, don't ask too many questions. So he keeps it to himself and he leaves. The feast is over and he goes on his way. Now, this also may have been perceived as, oh my gosh, this is so bad. How could you didn't fulfill your destiny, and now the wounded king is still wounded and this land hasn't been restored. But he ends up questing for another 20 years. And during that quest, he, of course, encounters so many obstacles. He saves a ton of people. He gets a lot more knights to join the Round Table. He reconciles with his mother, and he finally goes back to the Grail Castle. It is shown to him once more 20 years later. And then he fulfills the prophecy, asks the question, whom does the Grail serve? And the answer is, you, my lord, the Grail King. The wounded king is instantly healed, and the castle erupts in a beautiful celebration, and the land is restored to its beautiful splendor and glory. So this story also represents the slaying of the ego for something so much greater than oneself, because the Grail, that is what the Grail is. Whom does the Grail serve? The Grail serves this high divine purpose, like your quest serves, like we must serve in this life, to ascend from the state of the mind and the ego into the divine flow. So it does work out exactly the way it was meant to, and he does fulfill his prophecy, his destiny, just as you will. No matter where you are on your journey right now, just trust that you are exactly where you're meant to be. So many times in my life when I have felt so downtrodden and lost and wondering, oh, where do I go from here? And have I chosen wrong? And what do I do? I truly remind myself I'm exactly where I'm meant to be, even if it feels tough. Trusting in that is like the greatest gift, I think. The divine has already been leading your life. It already has been leading your life, even if you're someone who tries to control it. But it's when you become genuinely aware of that you can become the conscious co-creator of your reality and of your destiny. And you can observe your ego when it tries to come up, when that dragon tries to be resurrected. And instead of it ruling you, You can be the observer of it and choose how to react to it. And of course, the dragons hoard all the treasure. So when they're slain, that gold is yours. That's what lies behind giving up a life of attachment to outcomes, of judgment of situations, of trying to control everything. There's so much treasure waiting for you when you let the divine, the source, whatever you call it, lead your life with so much trust. And of course, that does not mean that you are going to be apathetic to your life, but you will have a greater intention behind everything that you do. And you will have a greater peace about the things that flow into and out of your life, because you'll just know, trust, and surrender that it's all unfolding the way that it is meant to. So I hope that those tales gave some insight to you as they did to me. And of course, for the last bit of this, we will draw a card, which I totally forgot to do last episode. Sorry about that. From the Hero's Journey Dream Oracle. So let me just give the cards a quick shuffle. These are hard to shuffle because they're so big. And then cards, what message do you have for me and all of my beautiful listeners on our quests? What do you have to tell us for our quest today? You're in great company. Pull back to propel forward. Okay, so here's the message. Every hero and shiro in history has had moments of self-doubt, even paralyzing fear, before doing the courageous act that became their legacy. They felt the fear but did what they were called to do anyway. For this reason, you need not be detoured when you bump against uncertainty. In fact, doubt helps to chisel the ego out of the way, which is key to accomplishing a mission of merit and becoming a channel of grace a higher purpose can move through. Know that you are in great company, and when you are ready, you'll get up and go like the great ones who came before you, upon whose shoulders you now stand. Mantra. Like the heroes before me, I feel the doubt and follow through anyway. What an absolutely perfect card for the message of this episode. If you got value from this episode, please like and subscribe. I would appreciate that so much. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you in the next episode.